All right, everybody, day 3, just back from lunch. Everyone's excited, full, looking forward to dinner tonight for all you attendees. So everyone out there that's watching, just go to the fridge and get a sandwich. Now, coming up next, we have a great treat for you guys here. Speaking on the 3 pillars of seductive success, Australia's #1 attraction coach, James Marshall.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are we all? The thing about the British is they're so fucking polite. How are we all? Good. That's very good. One thing I've noticed is that anywhere that was colonised by the British Empire tends to have issues with picking up girls. Have you noticed that there's very little in the way of seduction coaching going on in France and Spain and Portugal and Brazil? There's a reason why we're not going to set up business over there, because we would be having way too much fun and be out of business real quick. I'll give you an example of this. I was dating a French model for some time, and she had to go back to France to attend to something, and she was calling me from a public phone box. We were chatting away, and then I hear this scuffling noise, and then there's a man's voice, and I hear her speaking, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And she said, oh, it's okay. A man just pushed his way into the cubicle and said, you are very charming, I would like to take you out on dinner. And I was just there like, he did what? And this is when I was like a professional pickup coach, and I was thinking I was pretty cool, but I've never done that. Has anyone else pushed their way into a phone box to ask a girl out on a date? That's pretty fucking alpha. But what you'll notice is the guys there have to work way harder because the girls are used to this. That's why French guys clean up when they come to places like this. I think the reason why a lot of guys have a lot of trouble in this area, primarily, this has been touched on by other speakers, is because they don't own the fact that they have a cock. They feel a little bit ashamed about it. And we're taught from a whole variety of sources to hide the fact that we have a penis. I had a client recently who said, oh, well, if you're say dancing with a girl and you, he couldn't even say it, like, are you trying to tell me you're dancing with a girl and you get an erection? He's like, yeah, that's what I meant. What do you do? He's like, should I sort of like go like, put it out like this? And I said, no, you should pull her in by the hip and pull her in and hold your fucking cock on her hips. He's like, but then she'd know that. I'm like, yeah. Now she knows. And he had this epiphany. It's like, she knows that and therefore makes sense. Owning your desire is the core of what makes you successful in this area of your life. Men who are balls out get results. In Australia, we have one seduction technique. Now, I do not necessarily endorse this technique because it's ugly, but it works. It's called the Aussie lean, right? So in Australia, when you're fucking going out to get a root, first thing you do is you go out and you get real pissed, which you guys do, tick, and then you fucking watch some sport, which you guys also do, and then when you get onto the chicks, you just come over and you're like, how you going? And you just lean on her. Yeah? And the force of gravity means that eventually she'll probably just give in, because it's easier to have sex with you than to try and push a large Australian man off you. Yeah? Now, as I said, this is not what I definitely do. But this works because the intent is clear. It's ugly, it's brutal, but it works. Whereas the polite gentleman who goes up and has a pleasant chat about topics and interests and so on, goes basically nowhere for a number of reasons, which we'll get into. Now, when I'm teaching what is called natural seduction, okay, so now I definitely was not always natural at this, and this is something a lot of guys think when they meet me, because I'm very confident, I'm charismatic, I know how to look people in the eye and fuck them in the brain with my eye contact, that I was always that way. But I definitely wasn't. I'm self-taught natural, and I've hung out with a lot of guys who are way better than me when it comes to picking up girls. You know, I'm voted Australia's best dating coach and best natural using an election process that's similar to an African election, I guess. Not necessarily indicative of the actual realities, but I'm definitely the best dating coach when it comes to natural game, because the difference between me and some of my friends is that they don't know how or why it works. And so they'll say things like, what was one beautiful quote? Man, fuck hole. That was like the entire description of the method. And for a natural, that's all it is. It's because anything else that doesn't go with that reality doesn't exist. And anyone who doesn't understand that, it seems very, very confusing. But I went through a very long and arduous process to get to the point where what I do is freeform and natural. But because I was able to go through that entire process, I understand the stages that all you guys are at and will be at in the future, which is the advantage in my teaching. So let me tell you a little bit about the genesis of me as a great ladies' man. Was anyone here bullied at school? You know? I know you were. What do they call you, Sasha?
No one would talk to me.
Oh. And look at him now. We all want to talk to him. Okay, I was savagely bullied at school because I was quite good at music, classical music as a young man, and I went to a very sporty school. And my mother read a book called The Right Instrument for Your Child. And it was based on, your physique and your temperament, and then they would choose an instrument for you, and this would be the right one for you. Apparently, due to the fact that I was waif-like and nervous, the flute was the right instrument for her child, which, as you all know, is one of the sexiest and manliest instruments available. And so I studied the flute, and I became quite good at it. And as a result, I got beaten up a lot at school, because they didn't fucking like that, because that's a poofter's instrument. And instruments in general, poofters, but definitely the flute one is a poof instrument. And so I went home to my mother, and I was crying because with my flute bent and bruised and so on. Like, the guys are beating me up. And she's like, you know what? You should just hit them back. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do that. So the next afternoon, or the next time a group of large, savage Australian kids came at me, I went to one of them, and then they beat me up a lot harder. And so it didn't really work. But what I did do then is I did seek out martial arts teachers. I decided that originally I got into it because I wanted to learn how to not get beat up so much, because this nose, if it ever gets broken, is going to ruin my beautiful face, and I can't afford that, because then I'd have to rely on my charm. And so I started doing martial arts at a young age. And this, along with music, became my obsession. And I was lucky enough to find some very, very traditional Shaolin Kung Fu teachers in Australia, believe it or not, and decided to follow that and see where it would lead me. Now, I'm going to be talking a little bit later about lifestyle design, because I think that's an area that tends to get neglected in this field. And it's one of the best ways to get laid, to have awesome experiences, to create opportunities in your life, is to engineer a lifestyle that is attractive, because then it becomes a machine for drawing people into you. It's not the only thing that you have to do. You do need to know how to be able to go out there, meet strangers on the street or wherever it is, and draw them into your life. But if you don't have an amazing life to draw them into, if they're, I hate to say this word, high value, if they're women with high self-esteem that lots of people want to be around, then they want to be around guys who've got something going on. Yeah. So many years later, I went to China to study Chinese medicine. And if you want to study at Shaolin Temple, if you want to study Kung Fu there, you can't just rock up. You can't just turn up and go, teach me. There's a very, very strict process. You have to be at a certain point in a lineage, and you have to have worked your ass off for 10 years plus before anyone's going to accept you in there. Now, I was over studying Chinese medicine, and I decided at the end of that to just go and check out the temple. I knew that it wasn't my turn or anything, but I just thought I'd go and fucking check it out. So I rocked up at this place, which to me was the most amazing place that I could ever go to. So, whoever your mentors are, whoever your heroes are, imagine going to that place on the other side of the world and being finally there in the presence of these people. And I rocked up, and I walked around the temple with all the other Chinese and Western tourists and checking it all out and going, one day I would love to just come back here and really fucking do this properly. And then I missed the last bus out of that temple, and so there was nowhere for me to stay. And it was a nice summer's evening, so I decided to buy a rice mat and take my bamboo flute and go and sit and meditate on the mountain and sleep the night there. And I was walking along, a Chinese lady came up to me and she said, Kezia, how do I say? I've forgotten all my Chinese. Where it's, 在哪里去? Is that all right? 在哪里去? Where are you going? Yeah, okay. He's like, yeah, sure. Hey? True, all right, I'll just make up Chinese words. All right. She said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to the mountain. And she said, no, come and stay at my place. And then when we were halfway there, then she said it's going to be very expensive, which is, good Chinese businesswoman. And asking me what I do. I said, I study Kung Fu, 我学习 Kung Fu. I would love to study here with this particular teacher. And her eyes lit up, and I told her who my teacher was in Australia, and she ran off. And then 5 minutes later, coming down the mountain was De Chao, who is the monk that I had always dreamed to meet. And he's my height, a huge Mongolian with a massive beard and carrying a monk's spade, which is this huge thing with blades on either end, just like in a movie, walking down the road. I'm like, oh my God, it's De Chao. And he comes up to me. There had been some misunderstanding. She thought that I knew someone that I did know, but that I was higher up than I was. He asked who I was. He looked me dead in the eyes, and I said, actually, I'm nobody. And he said, what do you want? 你要什么? He looked me in the eyes and asked me that. And in that moment, I had the choice. I could say, well, I just came to check it out. So, sorry for bothering you, sir. And I said, 我要学习. I want to study with you. And then he looked me in the eyes, held my gaze for a very long time and said, 明天五点, tomorrow, 5 a.m. And so the next morning, I rocked up at Shaolin Temple at 5 a.m. and began my training with my hero. The people who get success in life in whatever area are the ones who just go out and fucking take it. The ones who sit back and plan and wish and dream, stay that way. And you guys have seen many examples of this over the conference, of guys often who are incredibly young, who have achieved amazing things in their lives, who fast-tracked well past other people who may even be better qualified in the area, but didn't have the balls to just go out there and take it. I had a very, very clear dream. I wanted that more than anything else. And I found myself, by good karma or some circumstances or whatever it was, in a situation where I had one shot. And so straight away I called my teacher back in Australia and I explained, look, I've been offered to train tomorrow morning with De Chao and I know I'm not supposed to be here, but he's like, all right, do not fuck this up, Jamie. You got one shot at this. And so I took it and I didn't fuck it up. And it changed the course of my life because what I learnt there and in my subsequent visits and all the training that I did before and after that gave me what I describe as the basis for my success in this area. I didn't realize at the time when I was in this temple hitting rocks and meditating and swinging weapons around that I was actually learning to become an amazing ladies' man. But I was, because I was developing the foundations of charisma, of presence, of intent, of a core understanding of who I actually am. And when guys talk about this in the seduction community about, okay, well, be yourself, that's in some ways the best and the worst advice you can ever give somebody. It's way too ambiguous to really make any sense. It's like, be yourself, well, when are you not yourself? Are you guys being yourselves right now? They're like, I don't know, am I? It's getting all too existential for me. We're always being ourselves, but what we're actually not being is we're not being all of ourselves. And we have generally a fairly limited idea of what it is to be ourselves. I always tell guys, find out what else you are. Because you're an infinite being with amazing potential. You can try and be and do anything. There are all sorts of behaviours that maybe you haven't tried yet, which you can try out. And that's why when I get guys coming and saying, well, I like the idea of direct, but that's just not me. Or I like the idea of sort of letting go of the lines and sort of being more natural, but I just feel like that's not really me. That's bullshit. That's simply that you haven't experienced that part of yourself yet. And sure, there will be some things that are not you, But as other speakers have said, we'll test that out a few times and see where it takes you.